Hey everyone, it's Rosalie from the Purifying Place. Welcome back to my segment, um, Align and Thrive, Live Your Truth. Today we're going to talk about living and defining success on your terms. Because when you live in alignment, you define success on your own terms. I did a reel about this, about how when you basically operate from external circumstances instead of coming from within, you ultimately lose, right? Because when we measure our success based on this external validation, expectations from society, or the approval of others, we end up contorting ourselves, making ourselves palatable, making ourselves fit this image of what we think would be accepted. So we're not living in alignment with our truth no longer, right? Which sets ourselves up for disconnection, dissatisfaction, false sense of self, and just no fulfillment, no joy, no presence. So we're just going to talk about that. I think it's a really juicy topic, and I know we all can relate to this, in some sense, because we are humans living this human experience. But number one, the first point is we abandon our true path when we do this, right? When we are living based on these external um, reasons instead of coming from within. We have this checklist of what society expects, right? We need to have the money, the status, and then maybe the job we have, or be married by a certain age, all these things. And we end up chasing and wanting things that we've never really checked in with ourselves to see, is it something that aligns with my values? Is it something aligned with my soul? Is this what I truly want? Um, and we just kind of get lost in the emotions of pursuing those things that we haven't really validated for ourselves. Like, yes, this is what I truly want. So what happens is we might, and I've worked with clients where, they've checked off all these things on this list, but they're all societal expectations. And at the end, you can feel like, oh my gosh, I don't feel fulfilled. I don't feel successful. I feel empty. I feel lost, right? Because we've never really slowed down to ask ourselves, is this what I truly desire? And yeah, that's a huge thing. So that's part of what I do in coaching is I really focus heavily on the deconditioning aspect and um, letting go of those imprinting and those expectations by all aspects of the human experience from society, family, um, culture, right? It's just there's so much that you lose sight of who you truly are. So I really start heavily with that before we can kind of figure out, well, who am I and what would I like to create and what experience do I want to experience here in this life, right? Um, and number two, living from external validation, we become trapped in a cycle of seeking approval, right? This can look like people pleasing. I know for women, especially, right? We're kind of brought up to feel like we have to please, we have to not step on toes, we have to make ourselves small. Um, but the more we do this, the more we operate in this way, we're becoming disempowered, right? We're giving away our power. We don't even realize we're giving it away without realizing it because again, it's the conditioning aspect of how we were brought up, maybe some things we've experienced that is making us feel like we don't have power when we truly are powerful. Um, we never feel like we're enough, right? We have to constantly second guess ourselves and say, oh my gosh, did I do that right? Or, oh my gosh, they didn't like this. I should have done that. And just that constant second guessing and not feeling like we're good enough is so draining of your life force energy and not something that's going to serve you. Again, true success comes from inner alignment, not outward applause, not outward validation. Um, and number three, we operate from lack and fear. So when you are not aligned with your truth, when you're not walking this path from the inside out, you're operating out of fear. Um, because if your worth, and this is another thing, you're not really in tune with what your true worth is, because your worth at this point is based on this outwardly success, right? Because this is what you're expected to do. And if you're not able to fulfill that outwardly expectation, then you feel like you feel like you're not worth anything, or you feel less than, and you might put someone else up on a pedestal who has accomplished all those things off on their checklist, right? Um, which then hinders our own growth, right? We're afraid to take risks. We're afraid to show up. We're afraid to take up space. We're afraid to follow our soul's calling because maybe we weren't successful um, in this outwardly expectation of society, that we start second guessing ourselves and we become fearful, like, oh my gosh, maybe people are right. Maybe I shouldn't do this. I can't do it. And it just becomes this learned helplessness that keeps us stuck and paralyzed. When in contrast, trusting the divine timing of our path, trusting that it's our own unique path and not anyone else's, um, making decisions aligned with your truth and instead of fear, right? And moving on, let's see. Sorry, I'm a little sick right now. My voice is scratchy, but um, yeah, the next thing that, living with, outwardly expectations, trying to fulfill those outwardly expectations of others, we lose touch with our soul's truth, right? We kind of fall victim to comparison. We want to compare everything, right? We want to compare. Oh my gosh! Now with the internet and Instagram, you can see everyone like, oh my gosh, they're doing this and they accomplished that, and so and so has this business, and so went on this trip, and you're just constantly comparing, which makes you lose yourself, right? You just and makes you shrink your own self worth because when you compare, what's really happening is you're judging yourself, right? You're judging yourself and putting someone else up on this pedestal. And, in contrast, what works for them might not work for you, and vice versa, right? Trying to fit yourself into this mold of this other person's life is is just a way to just lose every time, right? Um, and it and on top of that, you are no longer showing up as your authentic self. You think, oh my gosh, this person has this and this person has that, and maybe they did these certain steps to get there, and now you're feeling like you have to do those same exact steps, right? You're weakening your energy, you're diluting yourself, you're not showing up authentically anymore because you feel like you have to fit this mold and follow these certain rules to get this outcome that someone else has, which might not always align with the truth of who you are and your own unique path, when really, your true power lies in defining success on your own terms, looking within, sitting with yourself, um, having that awareness to really tap in to your soul and listen to what is your true desire, and execute on that, right? And it might not always be easy. It might be something that you're like, what? I can't do that. Like, um, what will people think? Or, oh my gosh, somebody might have this reaction. And so it might not come. People think, oh, when I answer my soul's calling, it'll be so natural and everything will flow and it'll be effortless. But, you know, sometimes that is the case. And you do unlock a lot of energy when you're living in alignment. Although there's still going to be those times where it feels like people say it's a test, but it's really an opportunity for expansion. You're going to have these moments, and they might seem like the most ordinary little moments and sometimes bigger moments, but where you have a choice to either operate from your place of smallness, shrink yourself in that old pattern self, or on the flip side, you have the option to then um, act in accordance with who you are becoming, right? So, for example, in my, like, this happened to me recently, I'm walking that path of alignment too. I'm living in alignment with who I am and honoring, what my soul is telling me more and more each day. And something came up where a decision was no longer in alignment, and I had to kind of stop this collaboration with someone. And it kind of came up, and I was like, no, I can't do that. And I was kind of scared to end it. But the second time it happened, I was like, okay, you got to do this. Like, you got to practice what you preach. And I do. And I did. And it was difficult. I had to like self regulate and tap into my nervous system and see where it was coming from and kind of, parent myself through it. And in the end, I did end up doing it. And I, told this person how I felt and what my decision was. And I realized after I made the decision, it just felt really good. I was still kind of like, oh my gosh, was this right? I still kind of second guessed myself and doubted myself. Um, and now I'm realizing I don't have to explain my decisions to anyone, right? Again, after the fact, when we make the decision to align with whatever our soul's calling us to do, I notice sometimes it can come off as doubting yourself, invalidating yourself. Oh my gosh, did I do the right thing? Judging yourself. Maybe I did it wrong. Oh my gosh, I'm such a bad person. All this stuff, when really we're being invited to live our truth and stop second guessing and stop judging ourselves for doing so. And whatever anyone else tries to say about what your truth is, recognize and have the awareness it's not about you. And this was the one of the biggest things I've learned recently is when I'm living in alignment with my truth, sometimes people will say things in response that kind of throw you off, like, and it's really them projecting their own insecurities or their shadows onto you. And I've had this realization like, oh my gosh, I said my truth. I said it in the most respectful way I could from the most loving place. And I still haven't pleased this person. And I realize now it's not my responsibility to, and neither is it yours. It is not our responsibility to please people. It's our responsibility to live our truth. And I mean, that doesn't mean don't be disrespectful, but still operating from that loving and kindness place. And then whatever comes out from that other side, it's not your responsibility to deal with. Like, and this person wanted, this type of thing to happen and they wanted to meet and they wanted an apology and like all these things. And I'm realizing like that had nothing to do with me. And I can only have that awareness because I've healed, because I am operating from wholeness, because I know who I am and I will no longer be a victim of manipulation and distortion because I can see very clearly and truthfully now because I know who I am. And with that comes a lot of power, right? And again, we cannot lose we cannot work and move from the truth of our soul when we are comparing ourselves, when we are trying to dull ourselves to fit a certain mold, or when we're trying to people please. Um, and yeah, that's just one of the examples that I can think of in my life where it just felt like a huge leap. And I know now each time we do that, each time we live in alignment with who we are, and those tests or whatever you want to call them come, the portals of expansion, like now I know I'm operating at this, you're operating from a level of truth, authenticity, and it's gonna become magnetic for whatever your desires are. And I really feel that, and I'm seeing that in my own life. Um, oh my gosh, which leads into number 5, when we don't operate from our truth and when we are only operating out of wanting external validation, we delay our happiness, we delay fulfillment. And because happiness is not this end destination, right? It's a state that comes from living in alignment with your truth. And it's a symptom, right? It's a symptom. It's joy, living in authenticity. You're naturally going to be filled with energy. You're naturally going to be filled with um, just ease. And it's not saying you'll never be sad again, but your baseline is going to be returning to a state of peace, a state of joy, because you're not kidding yourself. You're being true to who you are, and energetically, you know that you're expressing who you truly are, and with that, just of course, it's going to bring joy, right? Um, so I guess your call to action is how can you shift from, or how can you look at different areas in your life of where you're still operating from this external validation, from these outwardly expectations of what success looks like, and then turn it inwards so that you can define success on your own terms, right? Kind of look through and look at all the areas of your life with this awareness of living in alignment with your truth and not feeling like you have to meet society's expectation or your family's expectations or um, again any of these outwardly expectations, right? And remember that fulfillment comes from you approving of yourself, you allowing yourself to live authentically, you showing up 100% as who you truly are unapologetically. Um, and don't pay attention to like the approval. And sometimes this can be, you know, disapproval and positive approval, right? How can you, because if you're working for positive approval, that's still working for outwardly validation. So, how can you move from this place of just 100% authenticity and not being swayed by any of this um, any outwardly approval, right? Because it can go both ways with approval and disapproval. Let's see. So just, yeah, start embodying your power and recognize that success is an inside job. And that comes with doing the inner work and recognizing your truth and knowing who you are and living that, right? When you stop looking outward and you start looking within, you win. And again, I did a reel about this. It's like, it's so true. It's like when you, and I think that's the process of this life too, is because I've known this for a really long time. And I've already, because I'm just naturally like the black sheep of my family, I just do what I know is right for me. But, after, I'm 36 now, I feel like every year there's just another layer of finding my truth, knowing who I am, removing another layer of expectation because no one's perfect, right? We all still have some layer of conditioning. And when we work through this process and become more and more aware, we just strip away what is no longer us, right? What's no longer serving us and come more and more into our power and embody it more. And it's just so exciting. But yeah, does this resonate with you? Like, how do you define success? Is it still an outwardly, um, checkbox that you are like, oh my gosh, and have you realized, or where are you operating from a place of, yes, this is coming from within. I know this is a true desire. I'm not working for outwardly expectations or familial expectations, cultural expectations, and I'm making my own. How can you then make your own aware, conscious decisions in your life? And living in alignment with that truth of your soul. And when you can do that, again, it doesn't have to be all of it at once because it isn't for any of us. But the more you do that each day, each year, um, after this, constant state of aligning, it's like you're living in alignment. That is going to just shift everything in your life, right? And you'll have that clarity. You'll feel that empowerment. You'll have that sense of peace. Um, and you'll truly live a life that feels fulfilling, right? Not just looks fulfilling, not just looks successful like on Instagram or on YouTube or whatever um, social media people use. You'll actually feel fulfilled. And that I think is worth way more than just having like this amount of likes on this post that people think, oh my gosh, yeah, you're so successful. But really inside you could be feeling like totally worthless. Um, so yeah, I feel like this was a lot. I don't know how long this was, but I just feel we're being called more and more to really look within and decide for ourselves what our truth is going to be, um, and what our truth is, and how we're going to live it in this world, in this realm, and actually take the steps to live our truth. Because again, it might not sit well with everyone, and what is our reaction or no reaction to that, right? How are we responding to that? And what is that showing to ourselves that we might still need to work on? Um, and it's just this process. And, so just be gentle with yourself, recognize that we all have room for growth. And regardless of where you're at, you're exactly where you should be in this process. Like, trust that you're exactly where you should be in this process. And if you ever need support, you can sign up for coaching with me. I'm at the Purifying Place on Instagram, and you can also visit my website, thepurifyingplace.com. But this is really my specialty. I just love this work and so passionate about helping people do this because I've just seen how it's transformed my own life. Deconditioning from all these aspects of what we think are ourselves, our expectations of who we should be, so that we can move from a place of empowerment and truth in who we truly are and create the life that we desire and love to live. And yeah, that's just my joy. And I wish that for you now and always. And this is the end of episode 2 of Live, Align, and Thrive, Live Your Truth. But I will see you guys for the next one. Okay. Have a great rest of your weekend.